Expeditions to settle the last frontiers of the cylinder continue. Wars rage across its landscapes. Some become indecisive meat grinders, ash covering the soil, blood pooling and corpses mounting. In others, breakthroughs occur that tip the balance. Yet breakthroughs aren't solely limited to the field of war. Settlements offer new opportunities, while tech advancement opens new, useful knowledge. This is the Civilization Battle Royale X, Season 5, Episode 17, Stalemates and Breakthroughs. Greetings everyone, and welcome to the 17th episode of the Civ Battle Royale X Season 5. Your narrator for today is Boki, fresh off my last non-final exam of the semester, and with just barely enough days to spare before finals season starts. And now I'm back, exactly 10 episodes since I last narrated. As usual, I'm narrating blind, so the me that's writing this scene has no clue what this episode shall bring, but I hope you enjoy. Our first OC of the week, as usual, is The Usual Map by Sonic Fan. It, and to a lesser extent also Lax CBRX Google Maps project, have been indispensable resources for my narration over the past 2 days. And here we have Orange's Church of the Cylinder series, showing how E17 found its way back to success through a combination of hard effort and piggybacking off their powerful neighbor's excellent religion. Also, make sure to check out the X-Lassie Episode 15 versus Episode 16 chart on the subreddit. As always, a very warm thank you to all the Ko-Fi donors. You make the CBRX possible. If you aren't in this image and have some money to spare, do consider supporting the Civ Battle Royale on Ko-Fi. Hopefully, someday in the future, I might be able to join these fine folks. Tang is first in the power rankings now, while the largest rank delta the previous episode was Lan Fang, falling 5 places to 14th. But I wanted to shine a spotlight on the second largest rank delta, Mysore, who rose 4 places to re-enter the top 10. Although they lost a city to Lan Fang, who then burnt it to ashes, and although the gains they made against them and Bangladesh in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands were quickly reversed, said brief gains, combined with their enemies' flops on other war theaters last episode, all combined as a relative bright spot for their future prospects, while serving as an indictment of Bangladesh and a call to put Lan Fang's powerhouse status into question. Combine that with them recently getting the techs necessary to sail the open ocean and sending settlers south, and there might be a shot of us seeing Mysorean rockets fly in a future episode yet. Will they be able to keep up the momentum, though? We shall see. And without further ado, into the action we go. We begin with a sight of the eastern front of the Bjarmi Wars. The Estonian front hasn't really moved much yet, while over on the Vyatkin front, some confusion is going on. Koloparam is being attacked by a trio of triremes. I'm unsure if this will lead anywhere. Glasisveller is below half health, but the only nearby enemy unit is a similarly healthy Vyatkin composite bow. The Vyatkins have more forces for a decisive push on land, but they have yet to deal damage to Umpi, despite capturing the nearby citadel. Off in the southeast, capturing the spirit of the age on the stage, is Federico Fellini, OTL a famous and influential 20th century Italian film director and scriptwriter. However, since in the CBRX he was born too early to make films, he has to satisfy himself with writing and directing live stage plays. I'm sure he'll win similar fame in due time in this world as well. In the ongoing Andaman War, Mysore appears to be desperately trying to recapture Reu and Saduim, but I'm not too positive about the results. They may have a slight edge over Bangladesh, and with any luck might capture Reu, but Lan Fang now has the strongest naval presence in the Andaman Sea and Bay of Bengal of the 3 civs. Saduim looks to stay safely under Lan Fang control, and should Mysore flip Reu, it'd be easy pickings for Lan Fang later. Off on the edges of the scene, we see Mysore trying, but not quite managing to attack Khulna, Yunnan leaving a lot of smoke in Pegu's remaining territory, and Lan Fang failing to attack Geju. Off-screen, Lan Fang retook Gugang Ngaja. I am a bit skeptical of Lan Fang's choice of theater commander in the Andamans, though. Sure, Eric the Red is a great admiral, but he's more an explorer and settler than he is a military man. OTL, he was the man who led the Norse first settlement in southern Greenland, and around the same time that, albeit unknown to him, the North was being settled by a branch of the Inuit that would become the modern Kalalit, or Greenlandic people. While Pegu and Karakitai end their irrelevant war, Mysore settles Chitradaruga on the Chagos Islands, probably much to the chagrin of Seychelles, who has 2 settlers on this slide, both in deep ocean. Not quite satisfied with just Fiji and, off-screen, a piece of Papua, both in Melanesia, Chono decides it's time to dip their toes into Polynesia by settling Guamblin on the island of Futuna. The tile expansion of Chono's colony here also cock-blocks that New South Wales settler from taking neighboring Wallis. Meanwhile, Caral seems to have taken a page out of Rapa Nui's book, occupying a bunch of islands with non-settler units so as to prevent other civs from settling them. Whether or not this opens up space for more Caral settles or ends up the same way as Rapa Nui remains to be seen. Also, what's up with all those Ternate triremes? Here we see the peaceful northern reaches of Teotihuacan and Cebuano Baja, both developing nicely. Teo has a pretty decent army size, though I feel its land forces may be slightly too range-heavy. Off in Kuhane, James Senegal is looking to start attracting investors to open a big market, which he hopes will gain enough profits to turn into first a national and then international chain. OTL, he is the founder and CEO of Costco. Off in the corners of this slide, we have some wars going. A group of Tlingit galleons is trying to assault Potol, but I'm not sure about their chances. Sure, all the nearby Pomo ships are the weaker caravels, but with the added support of land units, plus Potol's own city defenses, it's at best a toss-up if Potol falls, and even if it does, those swordsmen and horsemen will make sure it flips back relatively quickly. Meanwhile, the Ponca and Karankawa are suffering, with Anishinaabe invading the former and Susquehannock invading both. Zadade has fallen to the Anishinaabe once more. Elsewhere, Guiyang falls to Tang off-screen. Here, Guiyang falls to Tang on-screen this time. Nevertheless, with a nearly full-health Yunnanese galleon nearby, it's still liable to flipping. I think Tang's current attack on Guijing is both too small and too premature. Things aren't looking too hot on land either. Chuxiong only got 1 Tang unit within its land borders, and Kunming, despite being attacked from multiple directions, remains a safe distance away from any Tang unit and completely undamaged. Not that it'd matter too much if it was damaged. It's by far the best fortified city on the slide. That UA is broken. The 2 giants of Western North America have each ground each other to a halt, neither able to advance far from the current border. Behepal is being approached by Pomo land units from multiple angles, but not even a lick of damage has been suffered. Tlingit attempts to advance south of Katuli or on Makamo's western approaches are similarly met by either road-blocking units, challenging geography, or apparent gaps that lure, surround, and entrap over-enthusiastic single units, like that knight over there. Observing the horrors of war from afar is Christian Rosenkreuz, OTL, the legendary and possibly allegorical founder of the Order of the Rose Cross, also said to be a reincarnation of Lazarus and St. John. The Guaycuru celebrate their leader's capture of 2 Potiguara cities and a successful defense against Zavante by naming him Eso the Conqueror. That being said, the Guaycuru Republic is looking more sparse, at least on land. A well-coordinated assault by their neighbors could do a lot of damage. Chono might want to take advantage of Guaycuru's relative emptiness before they fill back up. Ironically, some of the border cities in the Guaycuru mainland, including the capital, might even be under more threat than the isolated Guaycuru colonies further south, as the latter probably saw less or even no unit losses in Guaycuru's recent wars, and thus may be better carpeted. I'm really sad for Wasolo over the state they ended up in. The only good thing about their downfall is that at least its beneficiaries are also civs I like. For what it's worth, the Wasulu gave one hell of a fight against stronger opponents, and promise to do so again in the future. They may well be doomed to lose the Royale, likely to Ores, but damn, they will not go gently into that good night. That being said, Cancan, which they gave to Ores in the peace deal hoping to cock-block Portugal, is being burned down as we speak. Will it stop after Pop drops to 2, or is Ores burning it all the way down? We shall see. Portugal, for its part, seems to be trying to get past Cancan's borders to continue the war, but with 2 ships, one of which is a trireme and thus limited to coastal and/or Portuguese waters, and therefore blocked by those stray Zazao triremes, I don't see them presenting a credible threat to Caruane anytime soon. Off-screen, an irrelevant war begins, as Kalmar DOWs Main, while a semi-relevant war ends, as the Kipchaks make peace with Viatka. The focus of this slide, however, is the ongoing Plains War, specifically the Anishinaabe leaving it victorious. Piecing out with Ponca, they get to keep both their conquests, leaving the nigh inaccessible fortress of Waiinzude and the new capital of Hubdon, either for other civs or for the future. Now Susk has to fight Ponca and Karankawa alone, but I think they can handle it. Their capture of Koko last episode widened the front with Karankawa, which should allow more of Susk's numerical and tech edge to shine there. The geography is slightly more challenging with Ponca, but if they capture Coapite and manage to stalemate Karankawa at the Brazos, they could have a relatively wide front to work with. France burned Bucharest to the ground, and neighboring civs are already taking tiles. The nearest settler is Wallachian, but in a cruel irony, the Pope is the only one who occupied enough space to found another city of his own. Problem is, the nearest settlers are all the way in Pontecorvo. Meanwhile, France is launching an invasion in both Hansa and Scotland. It's not going too well at the moment, but the war did basically just begin, so give it time. In the sidebar, Yunnan and Karakitai end their irrelevant war. Peshkaldaramesh informs us that Hansa is plotting against the Pope. Don't you have more pressing issues, like defending Wisbu? I'm honestly disappointed with both civs here. Mysore's attack on Khulna failed completely. Their advance on Rajshahi seems to have barely begun. Meanwhile, Bangladesh's attack on Chanapatna is going slower than it has any right to, even considering the mountainous geography. I would prefer Mysore to win, but I'm very much a fan of both civs, and come on guys, you can do better than this. We get a better look at the Franco-Hansa-Scottish War. In particular, Inverness appears in much worse danger than I initially thought. That being said, there's a large Scottish fleet off in the Channel and North Sea, so it's going to turn into a flip-fest. Furthermore, sharing a common enemy, Hansa and Scotland seem to have realized the benefits of close cooperation, and have open borders with each other, seemingly promising to help each other's defense and, hopefully, if everything turns out alright, offense against the mad Jacobin. Leading the French forces on the Hanseatic front is Gertrudis Bocanegra, who I already talked about in a previous season, I think 4? Regardless, for a brief refresher, OTL, she was a messenger and fighter in Mexico's War of Independence against Spain, having joined the rebel forces after both her husband and son lost their lives fighting against the Spanish. She played an important role in the resistance in what is now the state of Michoacan, but would eventually be intercepted, captured, and executed by the Spaniards. As expected, Reu has fallen to Mysore, but Lanfang retains the largest fleet in the area. That being said, their priorities appear a bit out of whack, as much of their fleet in the region is going against some caravels and galleasses in bumfuck nowhere, while the rest are scattered around the region, only a handful left around Saduim. Forget attacking Reu, they're allowing a Mysorean galleass to do a Leroy Jenkins at Saduim. Depending on its luck, it may even work, however briefly. Pegu makes some irrelevant peace deals with Scythia, Tang, and Kalmar, which allows us a better look at the Yunnanese quagmire. Tang's attack is going nowhere, despite the best efforts of Scipio Africanus, OTL the guy who basically won the Second Punic War for Rome. The Ryukyuan government in exile denounced Rorun, for whatever reason, which allows us to take a look at most of the Khaganate. it's got a pretty nice army going, with plenty of healthy and defendable cities. Scythia and Pakistan declare war on Circassia. The Scythian knights raid the Circassian borderlands immediately. That being said, both sides are relatively sparse in this shot, with Scythia in particular having its forces spread thin. The Seychellois, led by Admiral Gaius Duilius, OTL, a Roman politician and military leader during the First Punic War, and the victor of the naval battle of Mille, captured Inaba from Ma'in. That it might flip back to its original owners is not out of the question, but even if it does, it's going to be short-lived. The natural fortress that left Ma'in's core cities protected from invaders for so long is finally being reduced. Tang's Micronesian colony, while still small, appears to be growing nicely, despite being surrounded by Caral, Japanese, and Cebuano ships. Speaking of, Caral and Japan are at war with Ternate, but for now their attacks are contained near the borders. Look, I'm not that surprised that this war happened. It probably would have sooner or later, but I am surprised by who the aggressor is here. No, your eyes aren't deceiving you. Zaragua was the one to DOW Yanomami, not the other way around. And, for the time being, they actually seem to hold a slight edge here. That being said, if they're trying to do a defeat-in-detail tactic, they've committed too small a holding force to the eastern part of the front. Meanwhile, Ket and Yunnan peace out off-screen. Both Wisbu and Inverness started suffering damage. However, while the French are bringing troops to apply pressure on the former, they have, seemingly, mostly pulled back from the latter. What's up with that? Ma'in retakes Inaba, but I think Seychelles has more than enough ships nearby to flip it right back. Even on land, Ma'in's chances are getting worse, as more and more tech-superior Seychellois land units are approaching. The approach may be narrow and split by mountains, but make no mistake, it's only a matter of time before Inaba falls again and is secured. Lanfang by now has retaken the initiative from Banuba. Banuba's small window of opportunity against Lanfang had come, and it has now gone. Lanfang is even sending embarked units right into the midst of Banuba's territorial waters. It won't achieve anything, but it certainly sends a message. That being said, Gura Ngaja can still flip to that Banuban fleet nearby. Susk is attacking Coapite, and while they haven't dealt any damage yet, their position is better than in previous attempts on the city. That being said, I'd like to question the wisdom of burning Coco down. Sure, it might vent some unhappiness issues, but it's a strategic position Susk will need for further inroads against the bottom feeders of North America. Remember what I said about Patol earlier? Yeah, scratch that. Tlingit is committed. That's a whole bunch of ships just to capture one city. A large city, mind you, but one that from Tlingit's strategic view would probably be little more than a far southern outpost. A strategically located one, as it would allow more fronts against Pomo, including a potential strike against the capital, as well as further opening the Pacific and potentially threatening Cebuano Baja or even Teotihuacan. Banuba has built the Topkapi Palace in its capital, Junjua. Unfortunately, this wonder is next to useless in a domination-only game like the CBRX, a miserable 1 out of 10 rating in the stat sheet. Sure, it may boost culture, great scientist points, and happiness, and increase faith points from military buildings, but what good is that for domination? JDT's Nothing Ever Biapins meme is holding strong once more, as not a single city changed owners since we've last been here. Vyatka has defeated Bjarmia's attempts at Koloparum and is now attempting an amphibious horse attack on Glasisveller with the aid of some ships, but their attack on Umpi completely collapsed. The Estonian Bjarmi front between the White Sea and Scythia is near completely empty. Estonia has some ships in the White Sea, but despite their tech edge, I can't see them making a decisive breakthrough against Bjarmia's larger numbers and land support. Lanfang clears out most Mysorean ships in the region, prevents the Leroy Jenkinsing of Saduim, and also captures Reu for good measure. As Ma'in and Yunnan end their irrelevant war, Kara Kitai shows off its Yu, the Ordo Cavalryman. It's a weaker knight replacement, which starts with the Survivalism 1 promotion and gains more combat strength the further it is from its origin point. Well, it seems I remembered wrong. Sumer has a panhandle, which prevents Pakistan and Circassia from having a direct border, meaning Circassia's war isn't a two-front one for the time being, and it will remain so until either another civ joins or until Pakistan captures Sarepta. But the narrow border and hostile geography has been preventing a Pakistani attack on Sarepta for episodes now. I also don't think Phoenicia is going to be invading Circassia anytime soon, as they appear to share open borders. Them sharing a common enemy in Pakistan certainly helps strengthen relations. Tang builds the Amer Fort in Chang'an. A middling wonder for the CBRX, it provides additional great merchant points, boosts the combat strength of all units in friendly territory, and grants a free fort to the city it's built in. 5 out of 10. Zaragoza's attempt to defeat Yanomami in detail backfired spectacularly, as it is instead Yanomami who achieves a defeat in detail. While Zaragua has broken through the center, attacking Hawaro Wateri and Yahioa Pateri, the eastern Yanomami fleet has completely broken through and is threatening their flank and rear. The western Yanomami fleet has also survived in decent numbers and is threatening their flank off the coast of Jamaica. Prava Raiteri has suffered a good bit of damage, but the Yanomami forces in the region have managed to secure the city and protect it for now. The Zaragua still have a comparable fleet nearby to attack again, but on the overall strategic view of things, this may just delay a Yanomami advance. Meanwhile, Bangladesh and Ma'in make peace. Sumer is the target of some irrelevant DOWs, namely Zazao and Bactria. This gives us an excuse to look at the empire of the Wive Guy, and not great, not horrible, I guess. France makes peace with Yunnan and Pegu, the latter of which also pieces out with Mysore. Portugal also DOWs Yanomami, so we get to see how Joao's realm is doing. Their navy is fine, but their army could work to be a bit larger. You know, just in case France gets any ideas. Portugal maybe could have settled Madeira, if not for the Uail horsemen drunkenly prancing around out there. Portugal got some ocean-going vessels, so they could, hypothetically, make their way over the Atlantic to help Zaragoza's war with Yanomami, but I doubt they'll achieve much. As expected, Inaba flips back to Seychelles, but Ma'in's land forces collapsed before the Seychelles-Wa combined land-sea assault even faster than I expected. Inaba is now pretty securely Seychelles-Wa, and even if it might kill that night, I don't like that isolated swordsman's chances of survival. Janis Balodis, OTL, a Latvian general and politician during the Latvian War of Independence and interwar period, can only hope the narrowness of the approach to Karnawu will grind further Seychelles-Wa pushes to a halt. This is also a bit of a double-edged sword, though, as this narrowness is a result of Sumerian and Phoenician citadels. If the former, and especially latter, attacks, Ma'in is doomed. Tang has kept and secured Guiyang, and is finally starting to make scratches on the walls of Chuqiong, but progress remains slow. Tang seems to have completely given up on Kunming, probably a wise decision. Chono may still be sleeping, but they may be getting closer to waking up than ever. Sure, the DOW against Yanomami is irrelevant, due to a lack of borders and a few civs in the way, but it's still against a fellow South American. Maybe a subtle sign they might move against one of their neighbors in the not-so-distant future? Pomo retakes Katuli, but Tlingit seems to have the forces to retake it. The attack on Behepal appears to have evaporated, however. Also, damn, everyone and their mother seems to be hating Yanomami, as Itelmen joins the hate train. In a surprise upset, Karankawa has captured Koko from Susquehannock. They were the original owners of the city before they gifted it to Ponca in a peace deal, so this is a long overdue reunification of their plains territories too. It's still too early to celebrate though. Susquehannock has troops on their way to both Koko and Coapite. Peshkal-Daramesh is letting us know Jacob Marenga is plotting against Kalonga-Mazula. In other news, the sky is blue, grass is green, plants photosynthesize, seawater is salty, bears shit in the forest, and Runami Yachio is gay. Ethiopia DOW's Yanomami, Pakistan makes peace with Ethiopia, Pegu pieces out with Scotland, and Itelmen DOW's Biarmia, the last of which is a good excuse to see them. They seem to enjoy open borders with Ukraine, and are at war with Rorun, the tiny sliver of damage Kilush has, and the smoke of a raided border tile being the only evidence that this is even happening. As Maravi DOW's Wasolo, Susk captures Koko, and burns it to the ground. Now there's empty space for Anishinaabe, Ponca, Karankawa, and Susquehannock to expand their borders into, which means a potential narrowing of Susk's front against the North American rumps, which doesn't bode well for further progress in this war. That being said, much of the Karankawa army around Coapite has disappeared, and while the city remains undamaged, this may be Susk's best shot to attack the city yet. Fresh off their conquest of half of Ponca, Anishinaabe DOW's Pomo. Both sides appear unprepared, but Pomo is still just less prepared than Anishinaabe. Add to that the renewed Tlingit push from the northwest, and I don't fancy Pomo's chances of retaining their northeastern panhandle. Biarmia and Viatka make peace, with no cities given over in the peace deal. Still, this is a small victory for Viatka, as they did nab Koloperam. Ethiopia DOW's Biarmia, and France pieces out with Maravi. Biarmia, trying to pretend to be unbothered by the loss of Koloperam, captures Linlithgow from Scotland to compensate. Scotland has sent some ships to reinforce the city, but they keep getting stuck in Kalmar traffic jams, and are now too late to defend the city. They could potentially try moving to retake it, but I'm not optimistic. Off in the south, Estonia is trying. They're very trying. But it seems like this land is just cursed to remain deadlocked. Tang finally manages to capture Chuxiong, and has it put to the flame. Well, let's hope they stop before it's completely down. Otherwise, this breakthrough would have been for nothing. Still, this is a breakthrough. Elsewhere, Portugal and Karakitai DOW Biarmia, while Sumer DOW's Wasulu. The pendulum swings back in Banuba's favor as they retake Gorang Engaja and clear out nearly all Lanfang ships south of Timor, Flores, and Java. Nevertheless, Lanfang still has forces in the region that can retake the city. Banuba also denounces Cebu. Don't tempt fate, Jandamara. You may not like being at the receiving end of a protagonist's attention. Kankan has been completely razed, removing the Ores buffer between the warring sides of Wasolo and Portugal. Acting before their more powerful enemy can, Wasolo decides to do a preemptive attack, sending forces across the desert towards Admedias. They haven't met any resistance yet, but they also literally just crossed the border. For their part, the Portuguese, impressed with Joao's fighting spirit both in victory and defeat, give him the epithet the Soldier. Be it in defense of his people or in the expansion of his realm, he was always there alongside his men, women, and others. The Tlingit flotilla captures Potol, and Pomo looks ill-positioned to retake it currently. Most units nearby look geared for defense of Elem and Kokajal. Still, there is a long swordsman nearby, and the city is in the red. But the galleon occupying it is in the green, and more ships are nearby, so unless more Pomo units arrive, it may stay Tlingits for a while. Pomo DOW'd Potewara, but now we look at the Ket, and the northern reaches of their Kipchak and Karakitai neighbors. The Ket carpet is large and dense, but lower tech than I'd expect from someone who, in my mind, is one of the top dogs. It's also much too range-heavy for my liking. On the other hand, from what we can see here, Karakitai's army composition has the opposite problem. Too many melee, especially horse units. The small snippet of the Kipchak army we see here is too small to make an honest judgment, but if their overall army composition is comparable to what we see here, then they're the most balanced of the bunch, even if they still have a slight preference for ranged. One area where Ket has the other two beat for sure, however, is city defense scores. Even their two weakest cities on the slide, Turukhansk and Verkhnembetsk, have nearly twice the defense of the much larger Kara, and overshadow even Ilik, the best fortified of the Karakitai cities on slide. Susk DOW's Potawara, so we take a look, and the Plains War sure has taken a toll on their land forces. They're pretty sparse and thinly stretched. Their navy may be solid still, but Onondaga could do some damage on land if they attack now. The first relevant DOW of the Potawara hate train begins, as Yanomami, despite being the target of a similar hate train, and already engaged in a relevant war with Zaragwa, attacks Potawara. The approach is narrow, and Yanomami is now splitting its attention between two enemies, so this is a risky move. Things are helped somewhat by the fact that Zavante was at war with Potawara since before the hate train even began, but this is a double-edged sword, as while it gives Potawara another enemy to split its attention, it also allows Potawara to attack Yanomami by marching through Zavante. And Zavante has little presence north of Marimbu, right next to the Potawara-Yanomami border. Rounding off the Sunday half of my narration, we pan back to Yanomami's other relevant war. Zaragwa's attempts at Hawaro Wateri and Yahio Pateri have predictably failed, and they're now at a disadvantage against Yanomami here. Nevertheless, the earlier backfiring of Zaragwa's initial attack was nowhere near as catastrophic as I expected and feared, and they have managed to consolidate around Jamaica and more or less halt the eastern attack. Leading their forces is a familiar, yet unexpected face. Unwilling to either risk her mainland colony against Max or betray her girlfriend, but still wanting to get some lust for adventure and warfare out of her system, Grace O'Malley left Duale temporarily and offered her services to Zaragwa as a privateer. The Zaragwa were in a very difficult position, but with her help, they were able to somewhat stabilize their otherwise bad situation. We begin the Monday half of my narration with a shot of West Africa. Wallachia irrelevantly DOWs Biarmia, while Wasolo makes peace with Portugal, and celebrates by resettling Kankan, this time on the coast, and behind the safety of what I assume to be the Senegal River. Or is it the Gambia? I don't know, Lax will figure that out. Off in the corner we see Tutmosis III, who OTL was a 15th century BCE Egyptian pharaoh of the 18th dynasty, whose campaigns brought the new kingdom of Egypt to its territorial zenith, crushing a Canaanite revolt at Megiddo, conquering Syria up to the Euphrates, campaigning in Nubia, and even invading the Mitannian heartland, and also founding what some consider the oldest military navy in history. Pomo's northeastern panhandle is being squished from both sides. Tlingit has reduced Katuli to 0 health, and the only reason they haven't captured it yet is because their ranged units are blocking their melee ones. Classic. Elsewhere, the Anishinaabe are putting pressure on Kadiu with a well-balanced mix of units, including their Ogichita UUs. Perhaps most frightening is the leader of the approaching army. OTL Subotai was a Mongol general in the late 12th and early to mid-13th century. He was a soldier of Temujin during his unification wars in the Mongolian plateau, and rose through the ranks over the course of a decade. He participated in the vassalization of Xixia, the initial devastating invasion of the Jin, and the invasion of the Khwarezmian Empire. From there, he and Jebe were co-leaders of what is now called the Great Raid, the single greatest recon mission in history, destroying Khwarezmian, Eldiguzid, Georgian, Lezgin, Alan, Kuman Kipchak, Rus, Volga Bulgar, and other armies along the way, though likely at the cost of Jebe's life. He subsequently participated in the conquest of Xixia and the Jin remnants, before joining Batu and others on campaigning in the Rus principalities, and then Central Europe after that, coordinating the campaigns that culminated in the Polish defeat at Legnica and Hungarian one at Mohi, where he was personally present. The last military action of his career was a campaign into Song territory, during which he died of old age. Between Temujin's acclamation as Genghis Khan and his own death, Subotai only ever suffered 2 defeats, both during the Great Raid. One against the Rus and Cumans mere days before the Battle of Kalka, where he ultimately dealt a catastrophic defeat to them, and another against a Volga-Bulgar ambush on his journey back to Mongolia. The 3 Shakti Sivs of Bangladesh, Pegu, and Yunnan, DOW Potagwara, and Wasolo. So let's look at what they're doing here. Pegu is just sitting there, its southern lands still smoldering. Bangladesh, the angle isn't good to see how most of their war with Mysore is going, but there are some pillaged tiles on both sides of the border near Chanapatna. That being said, that Mysorean city is still undamaged, despite Bangladeshi numerical superiority. Yunnan, for its part, has retaken Chucheong, but Tang still has a substantial army nearby to retake it. And while the defense of Kunming was a complete success, the countryside, especially in the north, suffered the scars of war being as evident there as they are south of Dagon. The Hanseatic-Scottish alliance has managed some successes against the French, seemingly. Wisbu has been completely healed, and Hanseatic troops have pushed their French counterparts all the way back to the border. Inverness is more damaged than we last saw, but the French have seemingly pulled back from the city. Meanwhile, Royal Robertson is making some of his outsider visionary art outside Paris, not too dissimilar from how he did OTL in the USA. Lanfang enters the Enlightenment era, and celebrates by swinging the pendulum back, retaking Gurang Ngaja. They haven't advanced much beyond the city, however, despite the thinning of the Banuma fleet there, so it seems this war is slowly settling into a stalemate. The simultaneous Banuban, Mysorean, and Yunnanese wars seem to have also done damage to Lanfang numbers, as their army and navy, once pretty well carpeted, appear much sparser, more scattered, and more spread out than they have been since the earliest episodes. Speaking of sparse, scattered, and spread out forces, the other 2 belligerents of the Andaman War, Mysore and Bangladesh, don't seem to be faring much better than Lanfang. Mysore's navy is only a few ships large, and Bangladesh isn't much better. Both have lost much of their land armies too. Mysore's situation on the southern part of the land front deteriorated enough that their generals had to give up any operations to assault or siege Khulna, and have to satisfy themselves with merely razing its wider countryside. Overseeing this front near Calicut is Guo Kan, OTL, an ethnically Chinese general of the Mongol Empire during the mid-13th century, who served faithfully in the conquest of the final Jin remnants, Hulagu's Middle Eastern campaign, the Toluid Civil War, and the invasion of Song China, particularly in the many engagements around the crucial fort city of Jiangyang. He even briefly served as the first Mongol governor of Baghdad, following the infamous sack of the city. Also, Mysore DOW's Potawara. Guaikuru joins the Potawara hate train as well, in a second relevant DOW of this coalition this episode. They're irrelevantly joined in this by Roran and Scotland, the latter of which ends its irrelevant war with Wasolo to do so. Immediately, Guaikuru ships engage their numerically and technologically weaker Potawara counterparts off the coast of Jakku. Despite the relative paucity of Guaikuru land troops, the Potawara have even less, so perhaps Guaikuru might actually get the city this time. Additionally, it seems that, since ending their war with each other, Guaikuru and Zavante opened their borders to each other, and a Zavante expedition is already gathering with the tiny northern Guaikuru division around Katu to strike at Jakku from the north. Things are about to be ugly for the Shrimp Boys. Pomo makes peace with Tlingit, accepting the loss of Potol, Chanel, and Kawalau. Surprisingly, however, they managed to keep Katuli. This was a hard defeat for Pomo against their main rival, but at least it gives them breathing space and time to deal with the new Anishinaabe threat. Their northeastern panhandle may survive yet. Susk is finally making firm inroads against Karankawa, as they've brought Coapite to half health. Things are not looking good for the blue rump of North America. Potiguara's stalemate with Zavante continues, with many pillaged tiles on both sides. Potiguara made a paltry advance into Yanomami's sole bordering land tile, but with all the Zavante and Yanomami combos, I don't think that swordsman is long for this world. Yanomami is winning the northern front of the naval war, their techier ships cutting through the initial Potiguaran trireme line like a hot knife through butter that someone forgot to put back in the fridge. The Potiguara still have a large fleet in reserve near their capital, but it's entirely trireme-based. It's only a matter of when, not if, the Yanomami and Guaycuru grind it down. I'm not fully sure who the Ose Tutu here is supposed to be OTL, since there are multiple people with that name, from the founder of the Ashanti Empire all the way up to the current heir of that same dynasty. Subotai's siege of Kadiu is going well. The city is reduced to red health, and the Anishinaabe force around it is flanking around the city. Its fall may be imminent. The tactics that Pomo has relied upon to keep Tlingit at bay despite Pomo's sparse numbers are failing completely against a much larger and much better concentrated Anishinaabe force. We can also assume Anishinaabe has better logistics, but the most obvious advantage Anishinaabe has here that Tlingit didn't is geography. Tlingit's advance had to pass through tundra, over rivers, and flanked by mountains and lakes, and a narrow approach courtesy of the borders in the region, while the Anishinaabe have a wide open front, with little more than plains as far as the eye can see. Sure, there's a river on part of the southern approach and forests on the northern, but it's nothing like what Tlingit had to deal with. The French managed to push back into Hanseatic and Scottish territory, and in particular are now battering the walls of Inverness again. Nevertheless, I fail to see much of a difference in the city's health since we last saw it. Wanting to take a vacation from the responsibilities of admiraling the Babylonian sub, Guangaito was allowed by a council made up of himself, Nebi, previous seasons and Mark's winners, and the Blue Cassette team to take a temporary leave to explore the cylinder personally. Instead, under this ruse, he decided to enlist in the army of a civ in this Royale, and he chose to lead the defense of Inverness for the Scots. I guess he wanted to relive some of his old glories from the previous season? Lanfang has consolidated its rule over the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, but something is amiss here, and not just the inconclusive Bangladeshi-Mysorean fighting to the north. So, Reu's borders remained the same, and the city model is still visible, but the city display thingy has disappeared? Lanfang, what in the everlasting shit did y'all do? Mysore pieces out with Roran, and more relevantly, Bangladesh. This was a pretty pointless war, as Mysore managed to nab Saduim from Bangladesh, only to lose it to Lanfang, leaving both civs worse for wear. Worse still for Bangladesh, they failed to take the isolated Mysorean city of Karwar in either the war or the peace treaty. New South Wales has entered the Enlightenment era, a chilling prospect to any of their nearby rivals. Japan is attacking Sampalu with a small fleet, but given Ternate has a similarly sized force in the area, I don't know if they have what's needed to capture the city. Additionally, both sides' reinforcements are being blocked off by neutral powers, Japan's by Itelmen and Ternate's by Cebu. Here we see a Kalmar-centric shot where nothing much is happening. Scotland is actually committing ships to retake Linlithgow from Bjarmia, and they might actually take it, given the paucity of Bjarmian units nearby. Elsewhere, Estonia is attacking Venuskogar, ineffectively. Here we take a look at Onondaga in most of its glory, and oh geez, that's a lot of knights. You know what I said earlier about how Onondaga could rush into Susk and do some serious damage due to the sparseness of Susk's land army? Yeah, I think that damage will likely mostly amount to a pillaged countryside and a reduced Susk army, because Onondaga's army is basically all knights. Sure, the Onondaga army is numerous, but with nearly no ranged support, it's gonna struggle taking cities. Sure, bum rushes might net them a city or two, but at the cost of many a dead knight. Yunnan makes peace with New South Wales, the Kipchaks, and most importantly, Tang. Surprisingly, the Tang diplomats didn't swindle them into giving up a city that Tang didn't already hold at the time of the treaty negotiation, with Yunnan only losing its small island city of Guiyang and managing to retain the heavily damaged but still standing Chuxiong. Peshkaldaramesh lets us know that Teotihuacan is plotting against Karankawa. They have gotten Kuhane long ago, and Kopano is certainly a thorn in their side, so despite the fact that they were allies a relatively short amount of time ago, I'm not so surprised. Coapite is edging closer to falling, and that may open the way to Karankahua for Susquehannock, so Teotihuacan may be feeling like the Karankawa's role as a useful buffer state to the northeast may be running its course soon. I can already see Archimedes' comment for this scene. Speaking of Karankawa's buffer state losing usefulness, Coapite is now in red health, with more Susk forces arriving and less Karankawan units present. Anishinaabe manages to take Kadiu with a knight. With a longswordsman nearby, the city in the deep red, and the knight at half health, Pomo has a shot at retaking the city, but things are still looking bad for them, even if they manage to do so. We're now in the Sahara, specifically at the tri-point of Hyksos, Ethiopia, and Zazao, where that last one is showing off its UU, the Yan Lefida. It is a knight replacement with a reduced penalty against cities, which generates great general points from kills, and gains extra XP near a great general. Here we see most of Luba just kind of existing here. They got lots of their UU and a relatively well-balanced mix of troops. They're also having some inconclusive fighting with Moravi. There's also some stray Hyksos triremes stuck between them, Seychelles, and Ethiopia, presumably trying and failing to find their way to join the anti-Moravi war. Sad. Very sad. Here we see the Papal States with their new city, Ravenna. They're pretty much boxed in, with nowhere to go, but also with good enough geography and a dense enough army that they'll probably stay here for a while still. The Yanomami and Zaragua fleets appear to have bled each other dry in the eastern half of the Caribbean Sea. Yet in the western half, and near the border in the Lesser Antilles, their navies rage against each other still. The pieces have fallen into place, and the true nature of this war finally reveals itself: a naval stalemate. Inverness has almost fully healed, despite the French just outside its very walls. The Hanseatic land army seems beaten, and the French have 2 tiles ahead of them to Visbu, but these aren't exactly that conducive to offensives. Forests next to the Weser River. Hesse and the Palatinate burn. Observing that from afar is Sarah Breedlove, OTL, a late 19th and early 20th century American entrepreneur, philanthropist, and activist, notable for her company's line of cosmetics and hair care products for black women. In the southern Indian Ocean, in what I assume to be the islands of St. Paul and Amsterdam, we see 2 new cities by 2 civs, Seychelles' Koitivi and Mysore's Bacala. Another Seychellois settler is heading even further south, set to found the second city in Antarctica. Remember, Guaycuru already settled the first long ago. Also, Lanfang and Mysore make peace, with no additional city exchanges. Despite the potential threat of stray Zaragua or maybe even Portuguese ships happening upon it, the Yanomami managed to sneak a small force to settle and garrison Ashitawateri in the Azores. In peacetime, it could grow to be a notable entrepot of trade between Afro-Eurasia and America, while in war it could, if properly garrisoned, be used as a protective outpost from any eastern and observatory outpost against any northern threat, or even, if properly reinforced, a jumping-off point for invasions into Africa or Europe. Time will tell what fate has in mind for this island colony. Japan has managed to reinforce its force attacking Sampalu, bringing the city to half health. However, at the same time, Ternate has also reinforced its defense force, and with this force consisting mostly of galleons, while all attacking Japanese ships are triremes, things don't look that promising for the Japanese. The Japanese do have the option of sending their own galleons from Kyosu, but aren't doing it for some reason. Additionally, while Ternate's neutral power traffic jams problem has massively reduced, Japan's only increased, as Cebu has joined Itelmen with a token Tang contingent in making a mess out of the Northern Marianas. Cebu, notably, also brought the free settler they got from their social policy tree. Will they use it somewhere north of Kyosu? Also, in case someone in the comments points out, wait, doesn't Japan have a galleon near Sampalu? Nope. I initially thought so too, but no, that galleon is New South Wales, actually, just like that trireme off Jailolo. We take a look at the highly multi-ethnic Greenland. Onondaga has a strong military presence in the region. Karankawa is safe over here, despite not even half-hearted Onondagan attempts, and Scotland has just settled Dingwall. A quick side note from Doc Ito, I've actually been to Dingwall. Lovely place. Here we have a shot of the Maritimes, a domain split between Onondaga and Susquehannock. Despite the stuff I've been saying, it seems the two civs enjoy friendly relations, having had open borders for a good while now. Yes, I know it was shown in previous slides, I just didn't really have a reason to point it out until now. Highlighted here is Hanno, on the cylinder serving the Onondaga. OTL, he was a 5th century BCE Phoenician explorer from Carthage who sailed down the west coast of Africa. We do not know exactly how far he made it, but he definitely reached at least modern-day Senegal, and some hypothesize he might have gone as far as modern Gabon. Seychelles has cleared out all but one of Main's military units, and Carnawu even has a lick of damage. But this doesn't solve the geographic problem of the narrow approach between mountains, the sea, and the Sumerian and Phoenician borders. Seychelles is probably going to struggle making further headway here. Pomo retakes Kariu from Anishinaabe, but Anishinaabe still has a lot of forces nearby. Still, both armies are kind of handicapping themselves, as they only have 1 or 2 melee units on the front, with ranged units blocking off further melee units from coming to the city. This is going to be much more of a slugfest than it really ought to be. Damn it, Pontiac. Leading the northern wing of the Anishinaabe attack is Luis Alves de Lima e Silva, Duke of Caxias. As a youth, Luis Alves participated in the Brazilian War of Independence and the Cisplatine War. He then joined government forces fighting such revolts like the Baleada, the 1842 Liberal Revolts, and the Ragamuffin War. Finally, he led the Brazilian-led coalition forces in the Platine War, helping the Argentine Unitarians defeat their Federalist rivals after a series of bloody civil wars. Finally, he was the leader of Brazilian forces in the infamous Paraguayan War, and for his services there, he was ennobled as a Duke of Caxias. He later became a founding member of the Conservative Party and even briefly served as Prime Minister of the Empire of Brazil. Seychelles did settle a city in Antarctica, but it wasn't the settler we saw last time, but one of their compatriots, founding An Alpin. But they were still beat to second city on Antarctica by, of all civs, Zaragua, who settled Miraguano near Guaycuru's Antarctic colonies. Portugal settles Castelo Branco in the Cape Verde Islands, right on time for that catapult crew to get a heart attack from seeing the sheer size of the ships sailing just west of them. The ULUU, the Longa Fada, is a faster but weaker galleon replacement, which, upon killing an enemy unit, steals some of its XP and converts the rest into gold. As you might have suspected from the fact we haven't checked in since the beginning of it, the Scytho-Circassian War is going nowhere. I think... Look, it's a mess. Some Circassian tiles are pillaged, there's a stalemate in the east, and Scythia made minimal inroads in the center. For what it's worth, the Scythians have cleared Yedisan and northern Taurida of Circassian units and entered Crimea, but they have yet to deal a lick of damage to Bigorkol, let alone any other Circassian city. That being said, Circassia isn't exactly doing much better, with just one knight in Scythian territory and no damage to Dimkovo, let alone any other Scythian city. Also, Roran DOWs Wasolo, but who gives a shit? Banuba flips Gurung Ngaja back, but every time we come here, both sides' forces get more and more spent. Sailing south from Cebuano lands to spread the Anito faith is Gobind Singh, OTL, the 10th Sikh guru and the founder of the Khalsa, a special warrior vanguard within Sikh society, to lead them militarily and politically after him. An accomplished political, religious, and military leader all, leading the Sikhs during a turbulent era in their history, the reign of the Mughal Padishah Aurangzeb. He appointed as his successor as guru the Granth Sahib, the holiest scripture of Sikhism, a book that holds this religious leadership position to this day. Karal has had ships in the area for a while, but I didn't expect them to amount to much. Well, fool was I, as they materialized a substantial enough fleet to take Sampalu while Ternate was distracted with Japan. Ternate is now throwing the remnants of its forces in the region to retake Sampalu, and the city is in red health, but Karal has the local numerical superiority, and with the potential of the Japanese rejoining the combat, things don't look good for them long term. Biarmia and Scotland make peace, but more importantly, Zazao DOW'd Wasolo, which had just recently settled Sanankoro. Immediately, the isolated Zazao triremes out west assault Kankan, but I don't really like their chances, despite them dealing a good deal of damage, while a more substantial fleet of triremes is now off the coast of Karuane. But despite the fact that Wasolo's navy is even weaker at 2 triremes, due to the city defense and a sizable land force around the city, I don't exactly like their chances of capturing the city. Lanfang concedes defeat to Banuba, making peace and allowing Jandamara to keep Gurung Ngaja. The victory is a small one, and both cost more and lasted longer than would be satisfactory, but a dub's a dub. Susk finally captures Coapite, and puts it to the flame. The city is not yet securely theirs, however, as there's a swordsman nearby. Meanwhile, Tlingit builds the Taj Mahal. It grants extra happiness and culture and starts a golden age for the civ that builds it. Rated 4 of 10 on the stat sheet. I don't know who is stupider, Karal for leaving its border almost undefended, or Zavante for being emboldened enough by that fact to declare war and begin invading. Either way, Zavante quickly organizes an army to send south to retake Wadeze, so stupidly given away in a peace deal in their previous war. Let's see how that works out for them. Kankan has been successfully defended, and while Zazao is slowly killing Wasolo's navy, they've also scattered their triremes across the southern coast, further reducing their effectiveness against Karuane, despite this city now being effectively blockaded. Trying to remedy this issue, Amina secured open borders with fellow girl boss Diha, but right now only one Yan Lefida and one swordsman are really taking advantage of that. The positioning of the Ores southern armies will make similar attempts to pass through similarly difficult. Lanfang makes peace with Yunnan, ending their last remaining relevant war inconclusively. Main makes an irrelevant peace with Karakitai, while Pegu ends its irrelevant wars with fellow hated civs Potiguara and Wasolo. Here we watch the Pacific, near the convergence of Polynesia, Melanesia, and Micronesia. New South Wales settled Port Macquarie in what I think are the Santa Cruz Isles, while Banuba settles Bungardi in what I think is Tuvalu. All the while, Corral ships are passing by, presumably on their way to join the Ternate War. Alert! Alert! This is not a drill! Chono has officially awoken! Chono, at the same time it declared an irrelevant war on Potiguara, declared a very relevant one on Corral. Conveniently, Corral has taken nearly all their naval military units to the other side of the Pacific, leaving only 2 frigates and a tiny land force to deal with the sleeping giant of South America and its small but vengeful Amazonian ally. All of South America is now engaged in relevant wars with one or more of their neighbors. Despite the fact they're also at an irrelevant war with each other, in this chain of relevant wars, Chono and Yanomami, ironically, find themselves on the same side. Corral Potiguara Zoragua versus Chono Guaycuru Zavante Yanomami. Like North America a few episodes ago, South America is now locked in a war of truly continental scale. We'll see how the balance of power shakes out. Karankawa retakes Coapite and saves it from razing for the time being. Susk still has units on the way, but it'll take them some time to arrive, especially with that Ponca trebuchet now providing ranged support. Potiguara makes peace with Yunnan, and more relevantly, Zavante. This is technically a tie, but Potiguara is, if I remember correctly, at least on paper, the stronger civ of the two, so this is embarrassing nonetheless. Still, with Yanomami and Guaycuru both bearing down on them, better stop a useless slog. Still, this does shift the narrative I went with but 2 scenes ago. The wars now separate somewhat as it's Potiguara Zoragua versus Guaycuru Yanomami, and then separately Chono Zavante versus Corral. And in between all these relevant wars, Chono is also, currently irrelevantly, at war with both Yanomami and Potiguara. Someone should make a war chart for South America and the Caribbean in the days after the episode releases. Viatka and Hansa, DOW Wallachia. Viatka's DOW is irrelevant, but Hansa's decision to open a second front with Wallachia, while they're already engaged in war with France, appears to be almost as dubious as their decision to DOW France last episode. But then again, Wallachia's former treasury issues, which may or may not be about to return, have kept their science low and tech advancement negligible, making them lag nearly an age behind Hansa, so as long as they don't overextend themselves, Hansa may be fine, at least in terms of being able to keep a stalemate going. We also see the Wallachian UU, the Lefegi, a longswordsman replacement, which gets a defense boost against ranged attacks and a heal boost when starting their turn on a pillaged farm or trading post. Elsewhere, Wasolo and Yunnan make peace. Here we see the resources and yields of the Tlingit Corps, along with some details about their capital, Kachana Akwu. It appears to be 1 turn away from building a... I'm not sure, actually, but I think that might be a university. Also, wow, the minimap really enlarges a lot in this map mode. It also gives a much better look at just how actually squished and proverbially fucked Gru Crane is. They're basically just waiting to be eaten by either Japan, Itilmen, Roran, Tang, or whoever eats one or more of those 4 first. The Biarmian-Estonian front hasn't moved much, but there are some hints of change on the horizon, as a substantial Biarmian force is gathered near Mirkbiskoger and Shabelinskoe and is advancing on Koteljärve. Nothing is byapening yet, but things might start byapening soon. Off topic, but what's up with all these Phoenician biremes just randomly sailing in Biarmian and Circassian waters in all these scenes? Corral may be hunted by seals and bananas in South America, but they're definitely the seal hunters in the Pacific. Multiple ships are already blockading and attacking the unprotected Fijian city of Dangu, and more ships are approaching on the somewhat more defended Futunan city of Guamblin from the northeast. Also, is this our first sighting of the New Caledonian city of Guabtana? It might be. Also, Maine and Scotland make peace, as if that ever mattered. Susk retakes Coapite, and while not exactly secure, it does look more secure than last time they captured it. It helps that they aren't razing the city this time. Now's the time to send in those units dawdling on the other bank of the Mississippi and cleave their way to Texas. For our last scene this episode, we head to the city of Tlaquan, where Tlingit has built the Sistine Chapel. This wonder provides an additional culture point, boosts culture generation in all cities, and grants extra great works of art slots. Overall, a 6 of 10 wonder for the CBRX. And that's it for this week, folks. I bid you a good time unit of your choosing, and I'll see you around.